All right, so because John is so centered in, sort of the geographic markers, but also these festivals, who can remind us what festival we left off with last week? And does anybody know anything additional about it that would be helpful? Pop quiz to start, I guess.
Well, it's just one of three, which there were three main ones.
Yes.
What was it? Passover?
I thought it
Tabernacle?
was booths.
Booths is,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Booths and tabernacles. Yes. Yes. And does anyone, can anybody give a summary of what that festival is about? Or any sort of
The one in the
main?
fall? Is it the,
It
it's
is
the
in the
harvest,
fall.
right?
Yep, it's related to the harvest and also the pillar of light in Exodus. I know we talked a lot about the Exodus story. So they would build giant lampstands. It was really hard to find an image that might depict this. If someone finds one, I would be curious to see it. So I have an image that's not well sourced, but I don't know, we're just going to trust the internet today. But these giant lampstands would have been built, and then there would have been oil lamps. And I read that the wicks would have been made from the priestly garments that had worn out. And so as people came to the festival and they built these temporary shelters, this light would have appeared like a pillar of light for people to see, which then kind of leads us into the imagery of light in John 8 particularly. So anything else you want to share about the Festival of Booths or Tabernacles?
Well, the Israelites, they carried the tabernacle with them through the desert, and that's where the ark was, and that's where they believed God was.
Right.
They thought
So
he was just above the ark where the scrolls were.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, God was always moving with the Israelites, with the tabernacle.
Right. And
That's just what I remember. Yeah.
No, and thank you for bringing that up. And so we see in John, that from that original question, right? Like, where is Jesus, right? Where are you staying? So where is the presence of God? And John, the gospel according to John is centering, the presence of God with Jesus. I don't know if I said that well, but that Jesus is the presence of God and the revelation of God. Maybe a better way to say that. So we have one of these wonderful I am statements to start off with. We skipped a little bit of the beginning of John 8, but we definitely want to get to the spittle. So is there someone who would like to start off our reading today with John 8, 12 through 20?
Well,
thank you.
Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Then the Pharisees said to him, You are testifying on your own behalf. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid because I know where I have come from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from or where I am going. You judge by human standards. I judge no one. Yet even if I do judge, my judgment is valid, for it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is valid. I testify on my own behalf, and the Father who sent me testifies on my behalf. Then they said to him, Where is your Father? Jesus answered, You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while he was teaching in the treasury of the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot of themes that we've seen recurring in John: the symbol of the presence of God, the light, And then we also have this this testimony, right? And this idea of witnesses, and how many witnesses do you need, and can you testify on your own behalf? I know we have some lawyers among us, attorneys among us. So what particularly stands out to you in this passage, or is helpful in understanding it? I'd love to just open it up for a discussion.
Well, I have some sympathy for the Pharisees listening to that, because as a trial lawyer, I could just imagine myself listening to a witness say something like this. And well, frankly, suggesting to the judge that the witness have a psych exam.
Mm.
So I think that John uses the Jews, the Jewish leadership, as a foil, and makes them doubt Jesus, just as I think the synoptic gospel authors make the disciples dense, again, to serve as a foil for Jesus, to then gives insight. So I don't know, that's my takeaway from this. John is the only gospel in which Jesus says that he was there at the beginning and knew God before he came down from heaven. And so it's a unique portrait or Christology.
Yes.
What is the definition of Pharisees? Who is he actually being quizzed by?
I think it's Jewish leadership, and the Pharisees are, I believe they're trained in the law of Moses. And so it would be the equivalent of one of our courts.
I think my understanding is the Pharisees are the more priestly class, and whereas the Sadducees are like business leaders and that kind of organization. So
yeah,
between the two of them, they had their heels on the populace's neck, because they had to always, they had to exchange their coin, because the Roman coin was an anathema to. That's the reason for the money changers, because they had to exchange the Roman coins for a Jewish coin before they could buy the bird or whatever they're sacrificing. So
because there was a human image, the Caesar.
yeah, the
image.
emperor was on, his face was on the coin, and so that was just a reminder of the invader, so to speak.
My question basically is, they must have had the ability to arrest him if his timing was there. And they must have that ability to arrest him.
Well, yes, but on the other hand, what I observe reading over the story is that they were scared to death to do it in public, because the common people were on their side. So, they didn't have police cars and tanks and water cannons and what have you. They just, they were outnumbered, so to speak. So but this is, to me, is an example where Jesus is again giving the Jewish leadership a chance to hear his message. I mean, he didn't. I don't think. Well, I know he didn't hate them. He hates their sin here's another chance. I am. He comes right out. He says, "I'm from the Father, but if you don't know him, then you don't know me," etc. And their hearts are hardened, and so it's he never shunned the chance to get them into the fold. But I mean, I think this was almost the last time he had his chance to do that.
I'm somewhat conflating the various commentaries that I've read, but my distillation is that the Johannine community had been ejected from the temple by the Pharisees, the leaders. And so the Jews that are portrayed in a bad light throughout the Gospel of John represent that group that threw out the Johannine Christian Jews. And we shouldn't take John as anti-Semitic because everybody involved in the story is Jewish. So
Yeah.
the quote, the Jews, refers to the leadership that ejected Jewish Christians.
Right.
Yeah, this was the time when they forbade Jesus. He couldn't no longer preach in the various synagogues around around Palestine.
But
Or-
around 100 AD, this was after the Benedict. There was some decree issued saying that Christian Jews were no longer part of the temple, and they were kicked out of the temple. And I think that occurred around 95 AD. And
Correct.
so, and if John was finalized after that, then the stories reflect, what was going on with that community. For
Right.
example, the parents of the,
Oh, don't jump too far ahead. We're going to get there.
I'm going back. I'm going
Oh, you're
back.
going back. Oh, okay. I was going forward to the parents of the blind man in chapter 9, but where were you going?
Diane
Well,
had.
I've read ahead, so maybe that is where I'm going.
Yeah.
Something about how the parents didn't want to be identified.
Yeah, that's chapter 9 where we're going to
Okay,
get to.
so I
Yeah.
have jumped ahead.
No, that's okay though, because this is all very interwoven together, right? We have the context of when the book was written, some clues as to what was going on in that historical time pop up in this story that is set in the time of Jesus, but was meant to appeal to the reader at the time that it was written. So there's all kinds of clues. And then there's this general misunderstanding of who Jesus is and who is able to recognize who Jesus is in John, who Jesus truly is, and who should be able to recognize him but can't, and why can't they? So I think we're kind of in the heart of that misunderstanding, who can see and who cannot.
Don, to your question about the Pharisees, I think the Apostle Paul was a Pharisee.
Oh, sure, he was.
Thank
I
you.
spent a lot of
He was
time
a
on
Sadducee.
Romans
We
before
know
we
that.
started this, and yes, he was definitely a Pharisee,
So that
and proudly a Roman
Back.
citizen too.
Yes.
Well, if I might add, there were Pharisees that believed in his message. I mean, they were basically were moved by his message. So it wasn't like they were this solid mass, but of course, they were. They had to keep their heads low because they'd be excommunicated, so to speak. So
Pharisees believed in resurrection, and I think the Sadducees didn't. I think that's correct, but if I tiptoe out there any further, I'm saying I'm a.
I thought it was the other way around, but
Wait,
No.
Diane is shaking her head. I think Diane knows. Shaking her head, yes.
Little children's thing. The Pharisees care about what's fair, while the Sadducees are sad because they don't believe in heaven.
Oh, that's the little memory device.
Yeah.
Ah.
Double check that today.
Diane, thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, yeah, let's move on then to there's a long part in chapter 8 about this freedom from slavery and sin, and I didn't want to read the whole thing, but I also did want to just touch on what is this idea of sin in John. I think especially during Holy Week, there's a lot of talk about what is sin and what does Jesus save us from, and different understandings of that. And so let's look at the Gospel of John and see what to make of sin. Nancy, would you read this part?
Sure. Then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham, and we have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly, I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are descendants of Abraham, yet you look for an opportunity to kill me, because there is no place in you for my word. I declare what I have seen in my Father's presence. As for you, you should do what you have heard from the Father.
Thank you.
And he's actually talking to his disciples here.
Yes. Yeah. And what is true? And then saying, who are the true disciples, right? The true disciples are those who know the truth. Yeah. And what is the truth? And yeah, what is sin in John? What do you make of, I know this is just a short part of that passage, but.
Well, the biggest sin, of course, is not believing that he is the Son and directly from God.
Right. So that lack of recognition and belief is key to John, less so than what we sometimes think about sin as being these moral transgressions. And, that's not the focus in the gospel, according to John, at least not that I'm reading. Do others have opinions on that?
Well, I'm sort of wondering, as I'm thinking about Jesus saying at a time when there is no New Testament, if you continue in my word, you're truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. I'm wondering if perhaps the captured sermons might be what he means to continue in his word. What words is he talking about? Since no one had yet written down his words, or no one had collected his words. So
Right.
it's kind of trying to put myself in that scene and thinking, would that be confusing to me?
Yeah, and it might be confusing in that actual scene, but I wonder if to the readers of this gospel, in the original setting, when it starts out with, and the word, right? It starts out with Jesus is the word. So, but it's hard to think about the people that that Jesus was actually interacting with in the moment, understanding that he was the word. Would be different, maybe. Is that what you were getting at, Diane?
Yes, and I know they were taking him too literally about being, we're not slaves, we don't need to be made free. But I don't know, I kind of think this and the passage we just read are a bit opaque, so I kind of get their confusion.
Yes.
Excuse me. I'm impressed with the fact that Jesus was always consistent. Well, of course, we have the hindsight, we have the Gospels, but he was always consistent in saying, this is a spiritual kingdom. This is not a Messiah rider on horseback coming to slay the enemy. And that, you're right. I think that was hard for many to understand, because their whole upbringing was this Messiah, the centrality of the Messiah. So here he is, he's saying, I will make you free, because they are slaves to their tradition, and they got all these rules. And he just keeps knocking on that door, and some get it. Some hear that, but his enemies, they just didn't hear it, or didn't want to hear it.
When we started off, Christine, we talked about what the environment was, if you will, for John to write this, or whoever wrote it. And it was a time when, if I remember right, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seemed like it was a time when the word wasn't getting out as he would have liked it to get it out. So he was being very pointed, very black and white. Jesus is the way. So he was trying to convince the listeners. So that might be important in this texture as well.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's written, and we'll get to a little bit more of that because we get a clue, but it appears that at the time that this gospel was written, those people who were proclaiming Jesus as the Savior or Messiah were being kicked out of their Jewish synagogues. And that was maybe a bit different. Like this would not happen, I hope. But if we were to be kicked out of our church, we would just go down the street. But it wasn't so in that, that first century time. That was the source of your life and your livelihood and your community. So to be kicked out of your community had a real significance as well. So, yeah. We're in the thick of John. You all have touched on so beautifully. It's I just enjoy this so much because you all know where I'm headed, perhaps. But this idea. So who can remember what the second commandment is? When we teach it to the third graders, we say the second commandment, there are no two gods. You can't make a copy, right? So no
other gods before me.
Right. And no idols, right?
Right.
So we see in the coins where Caesar, who declared himself Lord and divinely chosen, right? His image on the coins, those could not be used in the temple because they were considered idols. And then John Hales, you talked about the idolization of rules and customs that sort of got in the way of seeing God's presence and who God was and revealed in Jesus. So you can kind of I was pulling out my seminary notes for this this particular piece, but in my seminary notes, I have this note about Isaiah 6, which is a really hard passage of the Old Testament, where it says, the coal has been touched to the prophet's lips, and then he has this message, go and tell the people, make the mind of the people dull and stop their ears and shut their eyes. And it's a really harsh passage, right? But in my notes, and there's probably commentary on this, but I can't point you to it, that this idea that this is about idols and idolatry. And if you worship idols, that you are becoming like those idols, right? Those idols can't speak, they can't see, they're inanimate objects. And so that kind of, I think, is a piece perhaps of what sin might be in John as well.
Those are the "Here am I, send me." Those are the words of Samuel, and they're the words of Jonah too, I think. I mean, that's an echo throughout the Old Testament. "Here am I, send me."
Right. So here it's,
the voice of someone stepping up and saying, "I'll do what no one else will do."
Right. I don't think that I would have wanted to, to convey this message to people, but I think this inability to see, this inability to recognize who Jesus is bound up in a rather hard to explain way in the inability in idolatry.
To Diane's point, I agree with you, Diane, that if I was living back then, I don't know which side I'd be on, because all of my training was to obey, the priests and the rabbis and my parents. And so, this is a real leap of, I guess, faith to say, nope, that's not right. I'm going to follow Jesus. That'd be a confusing time for a lot of people.
Yes. So here we have, another of the signs in John where a man born blind receives his sight. And so this ability to see becomes, quite more than, it's literal and metaphorical here. So Herb, would you be willing to read this as verse 1 through 7 on this screen? It
Sure.
continues.
A man born blind receives sight. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see.
Thank you. Yeah, so here we have this direct question, is blindness a result of sin? And Jesus, that's the disciples' question, and Jesus sort of rejecting that for a different view of sin.
I might just share you a paragraph, a sentence here. The rabbis taught that all such cases of blindness from birth were caused by sin. Not only were children conceived and born in sin, but a child could be born blind as a punishment for some specific sin committed by its father. They even taught that a child itself could be caused by some sin or other indulgence of the mother while carrying the child. So, but then the blind people got the places they where they could live by sitting and begging, and so they were respected. They each had their place. I kept thinking when I go to symphony that the same beggars are in the same seats for over 15 years, that I've been going there. So, and they say, in other words, give me an alms, and you, the giver, will be honored in heaven, or whatever phrase they use.
Reading this passage makes me think of our conversation yesterday in our Lent session about younger people may have the attitude of, wait a minute, look at everything that's bad in this world. How can there be a God? How can there be good? And this phrase right here really kind of explains it. It basically says, you didn't do anything wrong, but God is going to work through you to do good things if you let him.
That's really good news, right?
Well, I don't know if what's ahead in the next screen or two, but the blind man really has a task in convincing people that Jesus healed him. He says, all I know is that I encountered Jesus and now I see. So right. He's trying to give them the proof, and people won't believe it. So I don't know if that's where you're going with this, but that's what happens a little later.
Sure, right. There's this pattern of there's a miracle, and then there's controversy around the sign or miracle, and then Jesus is going to explain it, right? That's sort of the pattern right. We have in John. So yeah, where I'm headed is where the Gospel of John is headed. But I also found it interesting, when we've been talking about some of the other signs and miracles, like who approaches who, and it's Jesus here. There's no real interaction. He just kind of walks up to him, and he I would think even in Jesus's time it might have been weird to make mud with your own spit and put it on someone that you hadn't yet introduced yourself to, but here we are.
Well, that's a good point, Christine, because you're right. I'm thinking, I went back and reviewed the miracles. In almost every case, that person or group came to Jesus asking to be healed, And here's this beggar, he wasn't even a believer. Jesus just decided to do this. But I think the key why he did it was to make a break with the Sanhedrin, because this is a violation of the rules on the Sabbath, to do this. So and he did this with purpose,
What I actually think it might have been to solidify his point. First, he came out and said, this is not a sin, this is God's plan. And then to reemphasize and gain credibility with the crowd, he said, he basically cured this blind person. So that would give him credibility for his story previously.
Mm. Yeah, we're going to get deep into the who's a witness again. I found, you may remember, those of you who were studying the prodigal son, we had those images in the French shipping yard from, this is the James Tissot. And so I was looking through, Vanderbilt has a library of images that go with particular scriptures. And this one came up. So I don't know if, is this, those of you who have been to Israel, is this an actual place, this pool? That you can
Yes.
still visit? Yes. Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Does it look like this? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of piles of stone over there, so that it's fairly, it's of memory that, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's someplace we could research a little more. So much to research in John. We could probably do this for years, lifetimes even. So Don, would you read, these are verses 8 through 12?
The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam,'" I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that, "and wash." Then I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, I do not know."
Thank you. Yeah, there's always so many words in the Bible that it's like, well, how do we say this one? We just go boldly with confidence, trusting that we all know what what the correct pronunciation is. Thank you. Yeah, so there's these neighbors that realize that, you know, this man has been, you know, how did this happen? He can see now, and they're not even sure that it's really the man. And so now they want to know where this man Jesus is. I don't know that there's too much to discuss in this, but go ahead, John or Herb.
It's so graphic. The, you know, taking the mud and putting it on his eye. It's very visual, you know, pretty
Yeah,
earthy.
pretty earthy. And it's where John wanted to get to today. I feel good that we got there.
Yeah.
So now the Pharisees are back, and they are going to investigate this to see what happened here. So yeah, I think everybody's read. Is there someone who'd like to read 13 through 17?
I'll read.
Thank you.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then washed, and now I see. Then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him?" And it was your eyes he opened. He said, "He is a prophet."
Yeah, this is a nice back and forth. I think it was you, John, who was saying, you know, it wasn't just the Pharisees maybe didn't have a united view about who Jesus is. Right here, maybe we see a little bit of a disagreement or a conversation. Who is this man? And this is the first time the Sabbath comes up. I should have mentioned, I think that, you know, we're still sort of at the time of the Festival of Booths, which certainly adds to this like light image and being able to see. But yeah, this is the first time. Now we know it's the Sabbath day, and that is the rule that gets him in trouble with the Pharisees.
There's an interesting idea in there about the Sabbath, I think, and I can't remember where I've read this, but it is kind of thought-provoking to think that after Jesus, every day is the Sabbath. You know, if you live in his reality, it's not just Sunday. You know, it's sort of you can make an argument that he sort of blew up that notion of Sabbath and made God real every day.
That's a good point.
Right.
If I might also add, as you notice, the Sanhedrin called a council on the Sabbath to interview the blind man. And that's a violation of their own rules.
Mm,
So, this was pretty hairy stuff back then.
the plot
John,
thickens.
you would have been a good Pharisee.
Well, hopefully I would have been a secret believer.
Reading this section, really brings to light the sharp differences between the way the Jews viewed God and the way the new Christians viewed God, or the way Christ viewed God. Not just, following rules is what gets you to heaven, right? But also, I'm sort of seeing what you see a lot in the Old Testament, the belief that the Jews held that, if you were in God's favor, you were blessed. You could tell how much someone was in God's favor by the blessings in their life, right? And so he must have been blind because he sinned, right? Whereas think how radical it was for Jesus to say, no, that evil exists, right? But it's not that evidence that you are a sinner. That's not the definition of sin. I mean, it's really it's a radical shift.
Thank you. Yeah.
But it's
I'm with you,
also,
Nancy. I'm with you,
it's
Nancy.
consistent with what Abraham was promised by God. And God promised Abraham, your descendants will be the entire world. And that's a pretty amazing statement. I mean, that was the first covenant, right?
Yeah.
Right. And but that was long ago. And so, yes, in a sense, the Jews were chosen to be the keeper of the flame of the one God, because a lot of other human beings believed in all sorts of things, tree huggers, rocks, etc. So
It's a really interesting topic. I mean, my gosh, we could have a Bible study on that. God's chosen people. Why did God choose a people? And is that true? Can you believe that?
yeah,
Those words are said in Exodus. God says, "You are my people," and I mean, it's easy to find, but that can be a hard pill to swallow for people. I understand it.
well, to me, it's always a struggle to keep thinking in the context of the time these people lived, not and get rid of my own my own thoughts. I mean, we just can't appreciate how our ancestors were totally wrapped up in good luck, bad luck, giving sacrifices to the gods to be sure I get good luck. And one of the jumping forward to where we are now, John, is that the poor people, basically there was no place in the structure for them to be thought that they were saved, that they would go, they were left out of that theology that way. So Jesus, look, here's this man that says, you are free, God is love, and the only thing God asks of you is to have faith, and so, wow, of course that's going to be not nothing needless to say, within them is the Spirit of God, so that has an appeal. Period. Thank you.
Right. And if in John we see that Jesus is God, right? Jesus is from the Father and going to the Father. And if Jesus is reaching out to people of all sorts of backgrounds and conditions, right, then that's God doing that, right? That I think we can read and interpret John that we think about the chosen people, right? That God, Jesus was for all people, therefore God is for all people, right? That we don't have to have these exclusionary sorts of things happening.
Right.
You remember getting back to our friend Isaiah that we studied. He was the prophet that told his the tribes. He says, no, Yahweh is for all people, not just us. And that was a big revelation. So, but that prepared the way for Jesus' message too, that God is no respecter of persons. He loves all his children.
And how could God be God if that promise wasn't real and for everyone? We just don't know how it unfolds.
Right.
So much mystery.
Mm-hmm.
We're already at 10 o'clock, but we did get to the spitting part.
Well, the spit. It sounds like I was making fun, but
no.
But spittle was, that was a known medical treatment of things. It had this power because it came from the earth, and if it's from the earth, somehow the people of that day said the earth is good, and so that it had powers. Of course, modern medicine says, yeah, well, there's some truth in that, mixing certain dirt together. But anyway, never.
Right. Well, and now there's forest bathing, which is, being out in nature that is so healing, right? Maybe not, literally forest bathing, but I know I need to learn more about that. If you want to look at the rest of John 9, it's the next verse 22 in the next section I had, that where we see this clue about what might have been happening at the time the gospel was written, which was later than the time Jesus actually lived, right? So the parents of this blind man say something sort of peculiar. They're afraid to, sort of admit what has happened because they didn't want to be put out of the synagogue. So that's this, I guess, maybe in a little bit of an anachronism that is one of the clues to what might have been going on at the time of this writing. And I don't think that we know exactly what was happening when this was written, but it's a little clue.
You know what just dawned on me, Christine?
Sure. What?
Those words, I was blind, now I see. That's right out of Amazing Grace, right?
Yes. Yeah, this is Amazing Grace was part of the inspiration for the
right
song.
After 23, I think it's 26 or whatever.
I was blind, but now I see. Yes, John 9:25. Yeah, I was blind, but now I see. And I think that Amazing Grace, it was really a song about that spiritual awakening, right? That is where this chapter heads. So though we can't read the whole thing, I think that, let's see, where's a good place to pick up? So yesterday we recorded, don't tell everyone, but the Monday, Thursday service is pre-recorded, and we were in John 12 through, 13 yesterday, through the arrest. So definitely please watch the Monday, Thursday live stream service at 7:30. I think that you, especially having been reading John so richly and deeply, will enjoy it. And maybe we'll pick up next Wednesday, maybe with John chapter 11, the raising of Lazarus, even though we love Jesus, the gate and the shepherd in John 10. We don't want to, but we'll look at John 11. So,
just one last thing, Christine, on the parents of the blind beggar. I mean, here they are. They know if they defend their son, they're going to be thrown out of the synagogue, like was he. So I think they took the tactic of, well, he's of age, he's not a kid, he's of age. So why don't you ask him? So they sort of threw him in front of the bus.
Right, that whole idea of witnessing and do you want to be a witness? Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. It's just such a blessing to be able to read this with you. I learn something every week, and something that enriches my faith in my life. So thank you all for journeying with me. And blessed Holy Week.
Happy
Yes.
Easter.
Yes.
you.
Happy Easter for everybody. Yes.
Nice to
Yes.
see
Happy
Yeah,
Easter.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Spoiler alert.
Uh,
Jesus is going to die and he's going to rise by the time we read next week.
Yes, yes.
Take care, everyone.
Okay.